Hello everybody and welcome to another On the Workbench session. We're going to see what we can do on a couple of these pretty big sci-fi figures. You can see the references in the corner. Not a lot of elaborate colors going on, but what we're going to do is try out again the Green Stuff World Intensity inks. These, now that you've seen some of the contrast paint videos, you're going to see that these guys are real similar. But they have some advantages. You can mix these with water. You can mix them with other paint a whole lot easier. The disadvantage is that, remember, on one of the live sessions, when we went to put snow effects on top of these, it basically reactivated and tinted the snow effects. Now, I haven't used this yet at all. I think this is still sealed, so I'm going to have to probably shake this up a couple of times. I want to see if this is a little bit like the contrast medium. Who knows? You'll find out when I find out. And that's something I try to do with the Patreon videos. You can actually hear me shaking it up right now and just there, getting that open. And that's basically exactly what the contrast paint does. So we'll see. We've obviously got the usual makeup sponge. We've got our usual number 8 round craft brushes. We will have some Reaper paints out here. We're going to go with the gray liner. I think we've got red liner, sepia liner. We'll certainly use our Maiden Flesh, our off-whites that you see all the time. We're going to be using those. We are going to use our little homemade wet palette right here. That is the thing made out of the Chinese food container, parchment paper, and those chamois sponges I was telling you about. So again, we have a few of the liner paints that you're going to see. We'll see what we get, see what we come up with. And the idea is to have it looking like that reference picture. One of the places I wanted to use the intensity ink is, say, here in the spine where you got that pinkish type color there. We'll see. Again, I've been using these. I have enjoyed them. But we know we're not putting any snow effects on this, so I don't really have to worry about it reactivating because of some kind of water stuff. So we'll get right to that. We'll get these colors out on the palette. We're going to start off with what's equivalent to the initial shaded base coat, the glazes, that sort of thing. But it's going to be a little different because we'll add these in with our brown liner, gray liner, red liner, that sort of thing. So I'll be right back with that. So as with some of the other On the Workbench sessions, not every last little bit of this is going to be shown just for practical reasons, because like I said, these are commissioned figures and there's just some things I got to do deep in crevices that just aren't going to show here on the video. We'll do those off camera. What we are going to do is start out here. Now this is the one thing the intensity inks will do, is they have a tendency to just run all over the place. So after doing the contrast paint experiment, putting them in these, I think this is what I'm going to do from now on with the intensity inks. Because what will happen is this will get in and it'll stain the heck out of your sponges here. So I am going to see if I can't move these back. And this is the other thing too, is that the green, and I think it's the either walnut brown or septimus brown or whatever the heck it's called, they kind of mix together. So that is something that can also happen. Here we're going to move that up so you can see it. There. Yeah, see how that just kind of all became a little slime pile there? What the heck, we got it. We'll throw it here. Now this is not, see, I would prefer to mix the green liner in with this here. I just wanted to show you what this is, because you've seen me use the contrast paints, and this is just a pure show you what it does. Doesn't that look a whole lot like the contrast paint? And actually it tends to, if you're talking about the pooling element of this, it tends to actually pool in a less nasty spot. Or a less nasty way. It's easier to control than the contrast paint. So here we're going to do that again. You can see is that not doing a real similar thing to what people say you're supposed to do with contrast paints. Look at that. That is actually, to me, that's actually a little more efficient than those contrast paints. And it's also easier. See, look at this. You do this with the contrast paints, it's again, it's far less efficient, doesn't quite work so well. And you can see here, so I was able to basically wipe that away just with water. I can thin this stuff with water. So I can take that away. That you can't really do that with the contrast paints. But we are going to do, we're going to get over here with the gray liner. I'm going to take some of that master media, mix it in there. Just, oh, what the heck. We'll just go crazy. This is a little bit of that, what is it, Optimus Black. Yeah, I think the palette's where you can see it. Opulentus Black. I have to say, just between the one thing that these and the GW paints have in common is names that just are irritating. Just call it something normal. Maybe people like having the exotic names. To me, it doesn't matter. It's a black, it's a warm green, it's a warm dark green. I don't really go by those kind of labels or whatever. That's just not my thing. But other folks, they've got to know exactly what color it is. And it makes it really tough for me doing the videos when you have all of these, again, all these names you're trying to remember. And it seems like each company is trying to outdo the other one with the more exotic names. So, just if you're wondering, if you're a paint company or a company that's trying to sell paint and you want to irritate me, you can do that in a real hurry just by coming up with fancy names for things that really don't need to be that fancy. So that's just straight up gray liner right there. Now who knows, maybe the contrast paints fall down into these little crevices. This is a really not terribly fun to paint grate right here. Just, again, not my choice on the bases. They were provided. You use what is provided because that's just kind of how the commission thing goes. You can suggest, sometimes strongly, but you can only go so far with suggestions before they just kind of say, well, who is it that is forking over the money for this? So that kind of earns them the right to have final say on such things. And again, I might have to put some more of that black out there. And if I was going to put any kind of water effects or snow effects or anything that involved the secret weapon realistic water or some kind of... See, I haven't even put something like art code on there. I have no idea what that would do. I have absolutely no idea. I'm not going to try it on these. I will try it on something else where it's completely inconsequential. That's one of the things I do with my armies, is try new things there. If they work, that's great, because I found out that the intensity inks reactivate just on my own figures, Song of Ice and Fire stuff. Nobody even noticed. I mean, I actually have to point it out. So now that this stuff is dried, you can see. Now here it's still drying, but where it's dried, it's flat. It's fine. Now I'm just actually gonna take some of this black gray mix here. Then we're gonna put it on this lower portion of the armor here. So this is a pretty healthy portion mixed in of, let's go, master medium. So we'll see. I have no idea what's going to happen. Will it act? Because this is obviously not, this is not typical gray liner behavior right here. So I think what we're doing is we've basically taken gray liner, turned it into an intensity ink, for lack of a better term. I also have to say, and it's just something that an observation now that I've worked a lot with the GW paints. We haven't touched them, good grief. The last time I used them on a wide basis was pre-2013. So, and they are not my favorite paints in the world. I've gotten real used to the secret weapons of the world, the Reaper paints that are just, they're more matte. We'll just put it that way. The GW paints, I'm looking for a good term to describe it, but it's almost a little bit slimy. They almost slide around, whereas the Reaper paints, there's things that maybe they're not necessarily 100% the best choice for all the time, but they are going to be, for the most part, matte, and they are not going to be slimy when you paint with them. So that's just another observation. So definitely that is different behavior for gray liner paint. So that's interesting. Again, there wasn't just that master medium, but we also were throwing in some of the, what is that called? Opulentus black. Oh my goodness. And yes, you will hear me in exasperated fashion bemoan that name over and over and over again. Alright, so we're just going to do the same thing here on these surfaces. Now, you notice that I'm not taking the sponge like I normally would if this was just straight up liner paints. But the whole point of this exercise is to try and show you guys something new and different every time, and hopefully something that's not only new and different to you, but also new and different to me. Because this way, you can, when you see me react, for better or for worse, well, maybe that is a better indication for you, like, ooh, yeah, I don't want that. I don't need that. Now what we're going to do, okay, we're going to put the green out here where it's not turned almost yellow. We are going to take some green liner here. I'll mix that in. And we'll see what we get. I, again, don't know. We're going to find out right about now. Let's get some more of the master medium out there. That's an okay. I can deal with that name. I can deal with that. So definitely that's the other thing. I'm going to get myself some little containers to put on the palette, because the times that I've tried this stuff, it's gone a wandering, to say the least, and we don't need wandering paints. So again, they're not going to wipe this away. I just want to see, wow, how closely does it really act to the contrast paints. Now, I was just working on a few other figures, again, to experiment, to find out what's the difference between this and the contrast stuff. This you can use much more easily as, say, a subsequent glaze much further down the process. Let's say you just want to tint a bit of flesh tone somewhere. I would choose these over the contrast paints, because you can thin these with water. The contrast paints, you can thin them with water, but you more likely need the medium. Expense-wise, I couldn't be exact. These bottles, I'm sure the standard 17 mil. What are the GW jar? They're 18 on the contrast paints. And I'm sure that the contrast paint, oh look, check this out. You can actually see my magnifier light right there reflected in all the wet shiny paint. And it's not going dry shiny, don't worry. It's one of the reasons why I've started putting the glossy finish on things like gemstones, because, well, you just can't simulate that. Once you paint in something like that, it's just there. Can't do anything else with it. Alright, so what do we got here? So see that? We've effectively, again, taken the green liner paint and we've turned it into a sort of a de facto contrast paint. So for those of you that can get both of these, whether Green Stuff World Intensity inks or GW, if you have easy access to both, and you don't have to worry about snow effects or water effects or anything like that, then perhaps if you're looking for cost differential, cost savings, maybe this is for you. There could be more of these colors that come out. Gosh, I want to say there's 16. It was either 12 or 16. They tend to come out in either 6, 8, or 10 color packs, if you want to call it that. So obviously not as many of these as there is of the GW stuff, but that's... See, we'll do that on the other guy too. What the heck? What do we got to lose? What do we got to lose? We'll just try it and see what happens here. Like I said, all of this, the purpose of this experiment, yes, it's for you guys, but for me, this is where I find those efficiencies. Probably talk about them more in person with people, but it's, well, how can you paint that many figures in that amount of time? Yes, no sleep is also involved, but beyond that, how the heck do you manage that workload? Well, one way is by constantly experimenting. I just threw a little gray liner in there. A little of my gray liner mix. See, that sort of shifts that away from the bluish green just a touch. Finding those efficiencies, well, if I can find a little bit of a time saving here and there, that means a lot. And it's not just me, because you guys have less time to paint than I do. I do this every single day. 10, 12, 18, 20 hours a day. You don't get that opportunity. Not sure you'd want that opportunity. So you need to save time every bit as much as I do, and you may not, I don't know, you may not be as interested in the degree of efficiencies that I'm looking for. Because for me, and people ask, well, how the heck do you not get fried doing this much, that long, every day, no matter what? No days off, no vacation, none of that kind of stuff. No, it's stuff like this, where I had these paints out here. I've got the miniatures here. These are kind of different miniatures that I've never painted until, well, now. And paints that I've certainly never used in this combination before. As they say, that's entertainment. So entertain yourself. Boy, and I know it's rough. Doing new things is typically scary and not entertainment. Like, for me, bungee jumping, not entertainment, just more like terror and that kind of thing. For some folks, this would be their equivalent of bungee jumping. I realize that. No, we're bungee jumping with paint. So let's get into here. Got our gray liner again. We're gonna use that, oh gosh, Optilimtus black, whatever it's called, mixed with that, and we're just gonna boom, go right in here. Some of my green mixes in there. Who the heck cares? Who cares? Yeah, here we go. I thought too these could be an interesting subject because they're large, which is it's easier for you to see some of these big old giant surfaces on camera, especially. But see, all of this we can do the non-metallics here, just easier for you to see. But this is also the thing that the contrast paints struggle with, is large, somewhat mechanical but yet round surfaces. So we'll see once this all dries. I'm going to take pictures of it and such. Now remember, I always do, eventually, it may not be right away, but I always do blog posts of any of these, like these two guys. They will eventually show up on the blog. I'll talk about them a little bit there. And I do suggest heading over there because there are sometimes just little mini step-by-step things just in picture form. Stuff that I talk about here, sometimes you see those little, they're presented in sort of miniature form on the blog. But let's see what happens when this dries. Does it do the exact same thing as contrast paint? If it does, and it costs half as much as contrast paint, is it not worth just getting this? Because do you really need 34 colors of contrast paint? Which, by the way, do not all behave the same, and you've heard me say that, and I'm not the only one. Lots of other people have tested it, and they all say that usually the darker ones, the ones that I tend to like, those are easier to work with, or they tend to do the things that contrast paint is supposed to do, whereas the lighter ones, and it makes sense. When I hear people talk about it, it completely makes sense. Here, we're just throwing this in here. So again, this is essentially what you get from contrast paints. Is it as intense as a contrast paint? Probably not right now, because I've diluted the heck out of it. I've mixed gray liner in there. And who knows, maybe next time I do this, I get out the sponges and I'm wiping paint away. But that, right about there. Okay, now, okay, these we'll just do them. We're going to hit them with the gray too. Whatever the heck these things are that are kind of sticking out of here, we'll just... And the idea is the same as always, being super neat and all that kind of stuff. Not really in the plan here. I'm just going to run right down there. Now the belt, more of a brown. So see if there's any of my sepia left. This would normally be sepia liner right here. We'll just throw it on there. Like so. Let's get to the other one. Alright, so there. And what I thought I might try and do is do actually a little mix of my own. Remember we did, oh gosh, I think it was the third live session. Yeah, the third live session where we were taking the contrast medium and mixing it with some flesh colors to see if we could make our own contrast paints. Well, I'm going to see if I can't do something similar with some flesh tones. Alright. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to go back to this one, and as I'm waiting for that other stuff to dry, I'm going to break out the gray liner here again, wherever that is, and we're just going to paint that other base. And here we go. We got red liner here. This is, you've seen me use this before. It's one of the Vallejo game colors. It's Carn Marron Tan. Actually, I think I used that on more than one of the original Painting Pyramid videos. More than one. It's a neat color. You think, just looking at it, okay, that's something he's using for skin tones. Actually, it probably gets used on leather colors more than on skin tones. I know it sounds a little weird, but you've seen plenty of the videos. You know I generally like to mix my own skin colors. And I'm just going to take some of that. I think that's the walnut brown. I'm just going to throw that in there. So this sort of also makes your own little contrast paints out of things. I would be curious. Well, here we go. Alright, this is a good time for an experiment. We're going to stop right here. Now, I don't have any kind of a black contrast paint. Well, there's this Leviathan blue. This is the wild. It's the wildwood. So we're going to put these together. So this is the wildwood's going to go here, like that. And then we're going to take that Leviathan blue, just plop it right in there. Bloom, like that. And let's see what happens on this grating right here. Does it get down in there any easier than this stuff? Now, at first, well, can you see it here? First I was going to say yes, but it's about the same. Yeah, it's popping away just like it was. Believe it or not, the thing that worked best was the gray liner paint almost straight out of the jar. Yeah, actually that's almost, it's the same if not worse. It's probably about exactly the same. So once again, you never know until you try, and we just tried, and now we know. Oh, is that going to have to be another ancient proverb right there? Oh, painting proverbs. I got to remember that. I got to write that down. Oh, it could be one of those kind of nights. And by nights, I mean like 3, 4 in the morning. And for some, well, not inexplicable reason, there's still fireworks going off. Because they will be for at least 3 more days. So okay, that's interesting to see. I had hoped, kinda. Originally I was going to do these with the contrast paints, if for anything else, to have something that made it easier to get inside those stupid little crevices there. But nope, that was not meant to be. There's plenty of water surface tension there. There is one medium that I know, because I've used it. You're not going to see it here, because, well, I don't really want to be combining oil and this stuff. Oil paints, those would get down in there. 100%, no denying it. So this stuff here, basically, yeah, looking at that, it looks pretty much like all the contrast paint stuff that I've seen. Yeah, that does about the exact same thing. So I would say if you're looking for a substitute, whatever, for the contrast paints, why not give the Intensity inks a try? This is more of that master medium here. Just find a spot for it. Now, the tricky part here, I'm going to take some of, actually take me a sponge here, and I used to do this all the time with my watercolors. I'm just going to clear out a little spot there, because I actually want to have a little bit of dirtiness. So that's the tan, that's the red liner, and now we're throwing in some of that master medium. Again, see what the heck happens. It's different than water. It flows different, but see, it's still got bulk to it. Well, let's paint with it, see what happens. We don't know what's going to happen till it hits the surface. Yeah, see, that is, and it covers, interestingly enough, because remember the flesh tone here, this has not a lot of translucency to it. We're not really looking, we don't want that much translucency. Actually, see, that's working out essentially, probably a little bit better. Now we're using a different paint. We're not using the GW regular paints. So maybe that, I'm sure that's got something to do with it. He said, we're just going to go right in there. Doesn't matter if stuff starts to mix together, because we're going to be going back over this. Yeah, and it is settling a little bit into crevices. So that's an interesting result right there. Okay. Now, as you can see, skin colors are an awful big part of these big guys here. So we'll be spending a bunch of time on this. Now, I don't know if that will be the exclusive thing that we mess around with in the next segment, but most likely, I'm going to say, well, for sure, middle tones, but definitely we'll be doing some stuff on skin tones. Now, the interesting thing, as far as you guys watching this is almost like you're watching an oil painting video, because the paint just stays really shiny until it's dry. Whereas the miniature paint, yeah, that's maybe a little bit shiny when it goes on. It's not quite like this. So it's really interesting doing this. This is completely different. You see, I haven't actually, the only time I used a makeup sponge so far was to mop some extra junk out of the palette. And that's kind of the idea of these things, because if I did the exact same thing in every single video over and over again, well, you'd need to watch like 2 of them, and that's it. What would be the point in watching the rest, because it's pretty much the same thing over and over again. And for those that are comfortable with finding one technique that works and never, ever, ever, ever doing anything else different, I mean, I will not criticize that, because I can completely understand why. I will say that you will be more prone to some type of burnout if you're going to be doing it a lot. Because then you're just, it's like you're at a factory line and you're doing the same thing over and over and over. You know, voyages of discovery are dangerous, rewarding, but they have their hazards. That's for sure. So here we go. We're just gonna... There we are. Again, if a little bit gets on there, who the heck cares at this point? Not important. But I can see that starting to settle, and when it dries, it does dry. Now remember, we are mixing Reaper paints in with this. And we're just going to do the same thing over here. The other thing I'm hoping, and I haven't said anything about this, is that just, and it's been a really weird, very stressful week, but one of the things I did get was a new camera. Ironically enough, it's an old camera, because the camera that I got that I thought that was supposed to be better, it's a newer camera, cost almost 40% more, and everything else. Well, turns out, in comparison, it's, well, not good by comparison. It's fine in its own right, but compared to this, and this is an older camera, considered, I don't know, maybe the model before or 1.5 models before, but new and improved is not always improved. Sometimes it's just new. So yeah, I've actually gone sort of back in time and gotten an entirely different camera. It took a little while to get it set up, needless to say, because you're not just talking about plugging in a USB. So if you notice a little bit difference in the picture, whatever, pretty much on every single level, like this, we're going to do something here, just, yeah, oh my goodness. The other one, when I zoomed in, I'm zoomed in almost as far as I can be here. The other one would be mush. Wow. This is 1,000 times better. Oh my goodness. I'm going to back out again, because we're just doing sort of regular stuff here. Yeah, it felt really weird, sort of replacing the much more expensive new camera with a less expensive old one, and anticipating better results, and then being shocked by getting not just better results, but vastly better results. And if you're wondering why I found this out, It's because I used, well, one of these cameras for the area where I do my basing, that second workstation. Because I thought, all right, I'm doing basing. Why spend well over 100 hours on a camera that's just going to be focused on me chopping apart pieces of resin and Sculpey and cork? I just happened to put a miniature out in front of me. I said, wait a second. The color on that looks way better. And then I started doing some of the stuff with the zoom. And I said, what in the world? So yeah, if you notice a difference in the camera, or the picture, I should say, that is that new old camera. Go figure. There's a surprise every minute in this business, and not always pleasant ones. Alright, now I think we done got everything with something on there. So we've covered this up. Yeah, I can see that sort of settling in some of the crevices there. So what we're going to do is we're going to let all this stuff dry. And so this is our big experimental phase right here. We're going to go in and we're going to work on some of the skin tone here. Get a little bit lighter, but also see all that green? Oh, let's grab this one here. Make him bigger so you can see. Now I don't have a cursor, but you can see all of that green in the skin tone. See all that magenta there? That was actually mixing that intensity ink, that magenta, in with our skin tone. So that's going to be the next goal for our second segment here. So we'll be right back with that. So we're still waiting for some of the skin tones to dry. It doesn't mean we can't play around with midtones. And for the heck of it, actually, no, I think, this is what I'm looking for. Here we go. So this is the Secret Weapon Verdigris Pale Green. You've seen me using this before. It's pretty darn similar actually to that one. This one's a little bit warmer, this Jade Green. I think sometimes when I just can't find the one, then I just grab this one. Now, what we're going to do, I'm going to take this stuff and mix it with this. Does a couple of things. Remember that whole semi-translucent thing? Now, I'm also going to throw in a touch of sepia liner out here. A couple of things. I'm going to warm that up. Here, one last boom right in there. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking for. And let's not be too fancy with this. See what happens. See how that starts to equalize some of those areas where maybe you've got a little bit of roughness there. So that's something you can do. If you say, that's too transparent, well, let's mix another batch. More pure paint-wise here. Let's get just a little more of the liner paints in there and a little less of the medium. That's going to be a little bit less, it's going to be a little bit less transparent. And now, see, we take advantage of what we've already done with that, with our darker initial glaze, but this is definitely different than what you've seen me do before. And I apologize if it's a little bit, if it's weird, if you're like, why that is so different than what he normally does. Well, that's kind of what I want to do as often as possible, is to not always just do the same thing over and over again, because I don't paint the same way. You can tell from watching, say, those older painting pyramid videos. There's a reason that I put those out there every so often and label them as painting pyramid videos and not try to label these as new painting pyramid videos, because I'm hoping that you can you really get that comparison between the two. That you can see, you're like, yeah, okay, why does it look like he paints a whole different way than I just saw him do in this other video? Well, there's a reason for that, because I did. Your eyes are not deceiving you. The painting was done differently. Now let's just real quick compare this to this, so you can see how the areas are filled in more. Now I am going to cut down that's it. I just cut down the brightness slightly, just ever so slightly. Now I have to look at my pictures to see. I don't think I did any sort of chipping type stuff at all on these greenish sections here. Another reason I'm working with the green, and you'll see that pretty soon, is remember how we wanted to get that green into the skin tones there? Well, what kind of a green do we want to have? You always want to have some greens in your skin tones, even if it actually is a female character, whatever, because they're just green in the skin tones. Well, we'd certainly want it to be this green, wouldn't it? I mean, why would we take some other green and mix that in with the skin tone? Well, we certainly want something that's so predominant everywhere else, because speaking of painting proverbs, we'll just go right to if a color goes somewhere, it's gotta go everywhere. That is the number one painting, well, what is it? Not painting prophecy, painting parable, that's it. Yeah, that's the number one painting parable right there. Gotta follow it. And like I said, I am not worried about staying in any kind of lines here, because, well, as we work on our flesh tone, there's probably going to be occasions where we mash into the armor or do something like that, and we don't want it to be a big deal. So, skin colors, we're going to take that marrow and tan, see how that green is, take some of this green, I'm going to mix it in there, and even maybe a touch of that. Yeah, so see how that's got kind of a greenish tinge to it? I want some more. I want a lot more, actually. There. This is going to do a couple of things. Ironically enough, we are re-wetting the surface, because now we can do some wet blending. But you see, it's also a little bit lighter. It's a little bit more opaque. And right now, yeah, it doesn't have as much of a greenish tinge to it because of everything else that's around it. But as we keep moving forward, you'll see, and then especially once we get those magentas and pinks in there, that's another way again of, you can make a color more green, not by putting more green in that color, but by putting more reds or magentas somewhere else. So that's, you can change a color by putting down a different color. Oh, there we go. Painting parable number 12,000 probably at this point. Gonna have to start making those stickers. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna make stickers of them. And this way you can have them with you all the time. You'll never forget the painting parables ever. And now you know why I didn't really fret over precision on the armor, because it's like, oh yeah, miniature slipped out of my hand, brush smashes into it, carry on. Now, see, as this dries, this is really starting to get that greenish tinge to it. And like I said, it's going to look you have to be willing to let things look messy. There is no other way to express it than you can't have things looking pretty straight away. You've got to sort of suffer through where things don't look all that nifty, especially at the start. Because when I was doing 2D art, believe me, the paintings in those early stages, they looked like some kind of weird, abstract horror show going wrong. And then you start to build, you start to refine, you start to add the things that people kind of expect to see. And the next thing you know, you've got your finished product with all the different layers of interest that you want. So again, we're just trying to get down into some of these crevices here. Adding that hint of green. There you go. And you can see how much more, see a greenish tint to all that. Now, we're going to start to lighten some of this up. There's the maiden flesh we just threw into some of that marrow and tan. I'm going to get some of that over here. And let's start to work this in here. And start working this in. Thinking of the raised surfaces, and I don't have to necessarily be thinking about perfectly blended stuff, because remember we still have to get down into the crevices with our magenta colors. So we're just kind of marking that territory of the lighter skin tone. Like so. And if it can blend into some of the previous color, that's fantastic. If not, no big deal. Now, the one thing, so you can see that this, in some ways, like, well, even the secret weapon washes do the same thing. It somewhat extends the drying time of the paints. They don't dry quite as fast. But yeah, I would love to be doing these in oil right now. And talking about speed and efficiency, I would not be surprised if the skin tone would have just already been done on these guys by now, given what we did in the last segment and then this one too. The skin tones would look close to done. Now, they would be shiny, and they wouldn't dry for potentially a day or two. Like I said, everything's got sort of a trade-off. You have to, what is it worth to you to have it dry much faster, or to be able to do all that mixing right there on the miniature? Because I could actually have some of the magenta on there already and be painting this over the top and be letting those mix together instead of having to necessarily approach it more like that sort of glaze that we're going to do on these. So these workbench ones, here, let's show you the difference between the two there. These are less about showing you some kind of well-practiced standard technique than it is me either just doing kind of regular work, or, especially in this case, just trying something brand new to see what the heck's going to happen. And to me, these almost, aren't these going to have a little more impact than something where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, we've done that before, we've seen that. Okay, yeah, there's the object source lighting thing. We're using the same liner paints. We're doing the same thing that we've done over and over again. That's fantastic. Nothing nothing that hurts showing something multiple times to really just kind of get the point across. But if I never showed anything new, there would be no growth. Now look at this. See how that's sort of semi-translucent there? I was counting on that. That's why I wanted to have whatever remains of the Green Stuff World Intensity ink in there. I sort of wanted it there. Because again, that gives it just enough translucency. So in effect, this is almost more like the shaded base coat, except it's taking place halfway through the process. Very different from what you're used to. But there is no hard and fast rule that says, well, you gotta do it that way every single time. Well, what if you have just a different material and you want to take more advantage of it, so you just work in a slightly different way than maybe you normally would? Now, for me, this is not, like I said, it's not the way you've seen me paint lately. Had this been more of the usual process, I guess, as I make those invisible air quotes you can't see, I would have just taken some red liner and maybe some of the sepia tone or whatever, maybe a touch of the gray liner, and just dumped it all over the skin tones, taken the sponge, wiped it away, and then started to mix the skin colors in with that. And that would have been fine too. It would have been very much more similar to the process you've seen me use before. Something like this. Some of you maybe have never really seen me work this way. So we're going to put him aside. We're going to go back to our other one. I'm going to start to get more of that maiden flesh in there. But you can see that I really haven't cleaned the brush at all. So a lot of that stuff remains behind and still in the brush. There we go. I don't really know as far as who made these. I think Puppets or whatever is part of that. Gosh, what is it? War Games Factory, maybe? I don't know. I don't remember. I'm not even sure if you can get these anymore. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. That's really not the important thing is testing out the inks, mixing them in with, say, the Reaper paints and giving those a test. That is what's important. The figure is irrelevant. Sorry. Because oh gosh, what are they, Ogrins, right? The 40K guy. I mean, that's what the first thing I thought of when I saw these. If you're looking for something that's similar, you got Ogrins, well, boom, you can do this on them. Or, gosh, there's any number of different games out now, the kind of the post-apocalyptic sci-fi, or what's Dust, that's the other sort of kind of World War II-ish type game. This is more about giving you tools. We're not worried about the toolbox. We're worried about the tools. The tools inside. That's what this is about. And I'm just going to keep at this here. And like I said, in this case, even if they weren't quite as beefy as these guys, the skin does represent the vast majority of the figure, so we're going to be spending a big chunk of our time here. Now, what I will try to do is get to some of there's a little bit of freehand on these. there's a couple of symbols, there's a little bit of a pattern on those, so I may just not show every single step of this again, because I also don't want it to be a 5-hour long tutorial. Because all I'm really going to do from this point forward here is just keep dropping in more of that maiden flesh and making things a little later, a little later. This is probably more, oh gosh, what was it, standard layering maybe than you've seen in me do in other videos. But I'm fairly certain when I did the other one, that color test figure there, it kind of called for the same thing. Yeah, we're just gonna, yeah, let's make sure I got all of the, yeah, didn't hit this yet. Now you know why I'm doing this instead of the armor. We're gonna do this first, and then because the armor is kind of laying on top of it, sort of makes sense. We can kind of get in here with maybe a less worn out brush here. We get a little bit more of that. Take some of my original mix back here. And let's just, and you'll see with each layer, well, guess what? We start to, there's a little more delicacy, a little more precision being applied. But I can still see some of that greenish color that has remained behind. That's what I was hoping for. And even when I'm putting that, can you see? Yeah, see how there's that, you can still see the grayishness of the chamois through there, even through the parchment paper. That's because this still has, I could put more of that master medium in there if I wanted. I don't think so. I think this is just about the right amount of translucency that I'm looking for. Now, in the past, I mean like last week, when it came to trying to get some transparency in the paints, well, we were using the clears, right? And even the liner paints, mixing those together, those gave us a touch of translucency. We used the Secret Weapon weathering paints, again, designed with translucency in mind. Here, we're creating that sort of translucency by mixing in the intensity inks. And they're, again, same company that makes the texture rollers that you've seen me use so many times, and some other really nifty products that you'll be seeing in different videos and such. They have these. They came out with their candy colors. Now that's, I'm not even sure if that's something I want to brush on. That may be just more of an airbrush thing when it comes down to it. Oh, I was also advised that there are some sealers. Now this is, okay, here, another caveat on the intensity inks. I told you that they reactivate with certain things. Maybe if I was to hit them with some kind of gel coat or something along those lines, the same thing you would put on a candy color, because those always tend to reactivate. Maybe that solves that issue. I will try it once again. Like I said, I will try it on my own stuff. If the experiment doesn't go as expected, no big deal. Not a problem. So all the while I'm doing this, I got to think, all right, I need to preserve that original kind of greenish color that's down there, but we will be doing some subsequent glazes, especially out of the magenta stuff. the whole idea, I guess, behind these, now this is more in the way they're being used in the particular gaming universe that this person has created. They wanted them to be sort of like these genetically modified whatever super soldier type things. That's why they've got the barcodes on them. They're just basically these mutated things, these creations. I mean, like your typical sort of sci-fi type thing. There we go. Now I couldn't put as much variation in the skin tone as I might normally have wanted to with all of this nifty area here to mess around with. Because, again, that is not necessarily what is desired. But I snuck in as much as I could. I sure as heck snuck in more than I thought I could get in. Which is why you see all those fun magentas and such. Because it's kind of like this has been grafted on and it sort of irritates the skin or whatever. So we just continue to add a little bit of the maiden flesh in there. We work this forward here. Just walking that forward. And it should look really, really different now than it did just 25 minutes ago. And you can see I'm starting to get a little more direct with things. And the more of this gets on there, the more greenish some of that thing's like. And then when I really get into that pinkish magenta type stuff, well, then that's really gonna bring out some of that green down in the shadow areas. All right. So this may be one of the last layers that I had just applied here. Might go a little bit further. And then the next thing we'll do is we gonna hit the magenta down into these crevices here. And I think actually now what we'll do is we'll put a hold on that. We're gonna work more on the armor surfaces, I think. Yeah, we'll put a hold on the magenta stuff. We'll get to the armor because it's important to work on all areas at the same time. So we're going to do that instead. So we'll get the grayish colors here. We'll do the greens also. So again, that's definitely starting to pick out some of these individual, well, whatever kind of twisted muscles these are. And they'll be that much more enhanced once we get our magentas in there. But like I said, I think what we're going to go with next is we are going to work on our armor here, get that nice kind of interesting semi-olive green color in there. We're trying to avoid kind of the American style olive green or the Russian olive green. Who knew there was that many types of olive green? Alright, here we go. A little more. Just in a few spots here. That around the mouth there, that's also going to get a fair dose of that magenta mix. Alright, where else are we going? We got some stuff down under here too. Alright, I think we adjust now. Yeah, we can let that just sort of set for a little bit here. Next thing we'll do, like I said, we're going to get into these greens right here, take care of that, and some of the other pieces of the armor. So we'll be right back with that. So there's your skin tones. Let's get into some greens on the armor. Try and do some of the gray armor too. We've got plenty of stuff out here that we can maybe play with. I'm going to throw a little bit more of the secret weapon verdigris out here. We still have our sepia tone. Let's get in here and see what we can do now to start finding some lighter areas in the armor, and it's a little bit like the skin tones. See how that's semi-translucent right there? It's still got enough of that, but I keep wanting to call it contrast paints. Oh my goodness. But it's just got enough of that, just enough of that, just to keep its level of translucency. Oh gosh, what is it we sometimes call it? A dry glaze? I suppose this is sort of the epitome of that dry glaze, because no water in the brush, and yet we are working fairly transparently here. I do hope that shows up. Really hope that does. I'm going to actually, here, we'll turn down our... This is the other thing about the camera. Now, you can't see my camera controls from here, but with the other so-called more expensive, better camera, I would have the color intensity cranked up almost to 70. Right now, it's at 51. And I'm actually having to turn it down. The fluorescent paints, we did some tests with that. Oh, you're going to like this. The fluorescent paints don't bounce on this camera the way they do on the other one. So hopefully there's a whole bunch of different things that we can do here just to a much higher degree with this camera. It's kind of a relief, because I'd just been looking, tried everything, tried Googling things, and the nearest thing I could find was that, well, yeah, for whatever reason, that camera, which is supposed to be better, is not better. So we had to go retrograde, and we had to downgrade to upgrade, basically. It's just the darndest thing. And it wasn't like one camera was just $5 more than the other. It was significantly more than the other one. But yet, well, it just goes to show you, 35-cent brush. Now, is it the perfect tool for everything? No. I mean, even on this, you'll see me using different brushes, smaller ones. I have the sables. You've seen me use them often enough. They exist. Now, the reason that they still survive is because I will use these brushes most of the time. Now, see that? Remember how rough that was initially? Look at how flat and smooth that is. Now, I have to say that now you've seen me, I'm mixing in the secret weapon colors, the Reaper stuff. My next big test I'm going to do is to take the contrast paints and mix them with these colors and not the regular GW colors. Now, I know that's going to, for some of you folks that have a hard time getting the Reaper paints, that I understand, but I gotta know if there is a difference. I will not know 100%. I won't be able to say for sure until I try that particular experiment. See, I'm even going to throw a little bit of the gray on there, or a green on that part. So now, once again, I gotta make sure I grab a little bit of that sepia so that it doesn't get too bluish green. Oh yeah, look at that. And that is just so nifty. See, this, I have to say, when you're mixing the contrast paints with the GW paints, it does not, this is just a nice, easy flow. Whereas when you mix this with the GW paints, like I said, I know that slimy is not the most precise painting term in the world, but it is the nearest thing to it. It sort of slips around and slides, whereas this goes exactly where it's supposed to go and does exactly what I want it to do. See, even this right here. See these three panels that I just did right there? When you do that with GW paint and contrast paint, it's not the same result, not the same thing at all. And it certainly doesn't dry. This is drying so nice and matte by comparison. Why is that? Secret Weapon paint, it's designed to, I mean, it is really, that is part of its design. It is intended to be extra matte. GW paint, by comparison, I don't want to say they're like hard coat, but by comparison, darn near. So for the folks where it matters, that's something to just take into consideration. We'll put it that way. Now we're also going to try maybe the intensity inks with some of the creature caster paints. They're making, oh gosh, I think they're calling them transparents or something like that. And maybe that is their version of the intensity ink / contrast paints, whatever. So we'll certainly do that experiment. People have asked me about Nocturna paints. I don't have any. I really haven't had the time to try and contact them so that I can find, okay, what is their new stuff that's from the Kickstarter? What is maybe previous stuff? See, we're getting a little bit more of the Secret Weapon color in there. We start to get this a little bit lighter here. Because this is something I'm also going to use on the Cruel Seas ships. I have a whole Russian fleet that's all ready to go. So we're going to try everything on everything. We don't know if what may work, what might not work. Remember, and this goes back a few series ago, well, more than a few, the Winter Soviets, where I tried, I think it was something like 5 different snow combinations on there, or even the latest Dark Sword. Well, at this point, one of the last 2 Dark Sword videos involved different types of snow. And I'm also going to do some different types of snow on the Song of Ice and Fire miniatures, because it just seems like snow basing is what I'm kind of, I want to say stuck with, like it's a bad thing. But it's the theme I went for, and I want to keep that consistent. So here, let's go back. Here, we're going to get more of that Secret Weapon green. That is just so... Wow, look at that. That is just spectacular. So I have not attempted this before, say taking the Secret Weapon stuff, mixing it with the green stuff intensity inks. You could take the Secret Weapon washes and do something similar. Anybody that's seen the Painting Pyramid videos, you know that I did this with Secret Weapon washes, so I also would suggest, now they will act a little bit differently than these. Those, well, actually some of my favorite Secret Weapon washes, ironically enough, were some of the lighter ones. And by light, I mean almost like parchment colored. because they were, there's one, you're looking to paint concrete, go get yourself the secret weapon wash called concrete, because it really does. I mean, it looks like concrete when it's dry. And I love that one. The parchment one, you want to get that sort of really old sort of vellum look, parchment look on your, well, use that. It'll get you that. So I hope you don't mind that I sort of mentioned all of these different products. So, okay, here's this one thing we're doing. Here's 3 product combinations that might do the same thing. Because I guess I was just made that much more aware in recent months what's hard for people to get, or darn near impossible. And you know, if the whole idea here is to be giving you as full a toolbox as possible. Well, if there's no Home Depot or Lowe's or Menards or whatever the store may be around you that has those tools, well, those tools are of no use to you. So I gotta give you the tool. I'm gonna put a little bit of this. I just want to see. Yeah, see, it's got a little bit of little yellow in there, so I'm gonna actually go in with that with my one last thing here. Want to make sure I get into the other stuff here, the grayish stuff, and that's going to be, we're going to get into the gray liner on that. But guess what? I don't know. I think you can see there's almost a little bit of greenishness to some of the on the armor on the legs there. We are actually going to be throwing a little bit of this into the skin tone. So when we go into that final phase of the skin tones, we're also, aside from the magenta, we are going to try and get a little bit of green in there too, additional green. And the freehand on this is really fairly basic, and I'm just going to probably do it on the one, because I think that'll just, it'll be, you can repeat that. I think that's something you only need to see on one of these. And if you're wondering why am I doing 2 of these instead of 1, I would have rather have just done 1, but they both have to be finished. So there you go. That's just how it works. And if you're wondering how would I lighten this up further, which I may do, I'm actually just going to take a touch of that maiden flesh. That is another way to tie the flesh tone and the armor together a little bit more, is to take some of the flesh tone and put it in the armor. So we're kind of going, that way we'd be going sort of vice versa. And yeah, here we gotta get some more of this lighter green over here. And even at this stage, it's still kind of semi-translucent. That is what I want. That is not probably what some of you are used to. You're probably used to much thicker layers and then glazing over the top of that. And certainly nothing wrong with that approach. I mean, not like I haven't done that a million times myself. But there's something to be said for what I think I'm just going to keep calling dry glazes. I'm just absent-mindedly just throwing some of that green on here. Why not? See, and even, don't be afraid to get in there, use your finger, push the paint around. It's fun, trust me. So, oh, yeah, okay, we got enough. There's enough maiden flesh left in there. So now we'll just see there's a little bit that much lighter. This is maybe where we can... We're not going to do any kind of edge lighting or anything like that. Not doing that. I think that's what they call that, the edge highlighting or something. Yeah, we're not doing that. So whatever these things are, gosh knows. Like I said, I don't know anything about just the miniatures themselves. Don't know anything about them. I had not actually seen these before. Apparently, oh god, I don't even know what the game system was that they were originally meant for. Maybe Warzone? Ah, couldn't tell you. It's just, like I said, it is, to me, that is not the relevant, but it's not something I'm going to be playing, so it's just kind of, it's an interesting miniature to mess around with, that's for sure. Alright, this is going to be the last of the greens on here. Then we're going to move on to those grays. Now, I think I still have some gray liner left out on the palette. Some of the highlighting, I may bring out the maggot white in some places so that we can have a slightly different colors of gray here and there. Some cooler, some warmer, because obviously you use the maiden flesh as the lightning color there. Well, that's going to yield that warmer result. Alright, we're just gonna... There we go. Couple more areas, and then we're just going to leave that, go into the more gray surfaces, and yep, we still have some gray liner left. This is some of that, again, that original mix. Looking at the art, heck, I'm going to actually take some of the secret weapon verdigris here. Actually, let's take a little more. So there we got some of that out there. And in we go. Because what I'm actually doing here is I'm putting some darks in here. But they are still, even at this stage, they're still a little bit semi-translucent. Gotta focus mostly on here. Because it's too, well, flamethrowers, flamers, whatever you want to call them, those need those little stripe patterns on them. This is going to get the magenta in there, so we don't want to screw around too much with that at this point. Move on to the other one here. Alright. Yeah, we're trying to solidify some of our darks here. You can see that didn't dry too badly as far as, say, your pooling goes and such. I'd say it was a much cleaner pooling than the contrast paints, and you have to figure I didn't really monitor or babysit that at all. So once again, another hash mark, I'd say, in favor of this over the contrast paints. And I'll continue to use the contrast paints to see what new things I can find about those too. I don't want, again, the whole idea is not to just limit you to one type of paint or one type of mindset or something like that. It's really the opposite. I really want it to be more of a broadening type thing where you end up trying more stuff. You feel the freedom to do that. Alright, so I think we've got that pretty well aligned. Let's see what happens when we throw some more of the verdigris in there. Oh heck, we're gonna let a touch of that maiden flesh get in there. That'll neutralize that just a touch, and in we go. And this is really more of the middle tones in the metal. He also, obviously, this is not supposed to be shiny chrome or anything like that. It's just supposed to be sort of a... It's metal, but definitely not supposed to be super shiny metal. Which is why we're not gonna get too involved in reflections, but we do want some kind of reflections. But that touch of green that's worked its way in there, that's an intentional thing. Now let's start to get a little bit more of a lighter gray on some of your flamethrower surfaces here. And what the heck, maybe even sorry, a little bit here on some of these bits. Because remember, the magenta's going to go down in there. And that'll be the next thing that we tackle after we mess around with our metals here. The base is fairly simple. At this point, there will be, here we'll even throw a little bit of this over the top. Yeah, actually, believe it or not, the initial washes in there, those are still wet. That's how deep down in the crevices those had to go. And we'll get back to our first one, and I think you can see how this starts to emerge, but as always, it's still got that kind of semi... See, as I paint that over the top, it's lighter, yes. Does it fully cover it? No. Definitely doesn't cover that fully. See how, even though I've got the sharp point on the brush, what am I doing? I got tilted over on its side. That effectively gives me a much larger brush, but yet with that nifty little point on there. Now at a certain point, I don't want this to be green as in like this green. So then I have to move away from this green. Maybe that's where we start to bring out either the maggot white, or we have to use more of the maiden flesh. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to grab just one of these references, move it over here. So yeah, I am going to grab a little bit of the maggot white and throw that out there. There we go. That should be around here. There we go. Maggot white. Just going to throw it over here by where the gray and such is. Let's start mixing that in. But remember, there's still some of that, what's that called? Master medium. There's still some of that in here. That is why we have that. It's not going to cover it 100%, and I'm counting on that. I'm really relying on that actually not covering all this 100%. Now, how did I treat these? Okay, so that's lighter there. I'm going to get a little bit of light in here. But see how the brush is being used on its side like that? Again, on its side. This is a large surface. Why would I use a tiny little brush to do that? It's just so much easier to let this, say, I'm just going to plop that there and then let it flow. Here, see, look at this. Brush is on its side. Just right over that. Couple of brush strokes, poof, done. End of story. just going to go like so. Now, I know I haven't been able to necessarily track how this is going on camera as far as where the heck he is. So if he wanders off, my apologies, because, well, things had to get moved around a little bit. Here, let's go back in there with some of that gray too. And then I think you can start to see where this is starting to go. Now, touch more the maiden flesh. Lighten this a little more. Because we've got a long way we can go here. It's interesting for his, it's this big ogre type guy or whatever here, but the armor on the legs is very organic. It has a lot of fine curves to it. It's almost like a giant's version of some kind of hoplite armor or something. So up here, I feel like I need to get some more lights up here. I think that's where you can really start to see some of the translucency there. We're going to work some of that in on this. Even back here. Like I said, once the magenta goes in there, it's going to change that up a lot. Here, let's go back into our armor here. And again, see how I'm using the side of the brush. I still have the tip, but look, I'm just dragging that brush down. I'm just looking at myself to see what you see. It's kind of hard to do that, but interesting. Yeah, such a better sight line right there. And again, see, it looks like I'm painting with the tip only, but I'm actually painting with the side of the brush. Gonna do the same thing here. See, I'm just sort of pushing the paint there. That's gotta look like a weird brushstroke to some folks. Well, it's the reason I'm doing that, because look at how transparent that is. I think you could really see it right there. See, for me, there's a big glare on the screen from all my lights, so I have a really tough time seeing that. I can only really see just like, okay, is there a miniature somewhere on the screen? That's about what I can see. You have a far better view than I do. Spin this around, and again, using the side of the brush. Let's get a little bit of lighter action in there too. Now, how much lighter are we going here? Maybe not a whole bunch lighter on the general shading. Then we would go after, something like this. Okay, again, we're using the side of the brush here. Watch what we're doing. So we're just going over the top there, over the top there. And let's get ourselves a little bit of a And like I said, there's some things I would just have to go in with later and do that just post video, because I try not to make this about, okay, every figure that we do has to be some kind of potential award-winning whatever. Sometimes the videos are just about ideas and nothing more. And this is more of an idea slash experiment video than it is, okay, we're trying to make some kind of spectacular whatever here. Whatever the heck these guys are. That is not the point. And sometimes it's intentional. Or I just to force the issue and put the focus on where it should be. That's why sometimes I just don't show stuff. Because I just try to remove the distraction, basically. Now, I think, yeah, we gotta, yep, we still had to go back to this one here. Alright, so we're just gonna show you some, well, actually, yeah, maybe I will throw one last level of lights over this so you can get into some kind of an idea of how far we've come along with this here. Again, using the side of that, side of the brush there. Still working with that semi-translucent paint there. And now, what are we going to do? Let's get into our maggot white here. And then you can really see the big difference. So, as we start to do something like this, you see, look at how far away we were from getting that really, really light highlight. And we're not even at white yet, because remember, maggot white is not white. It's got a little bit of bluishness to it. Is that, oh, sorry. So I think that gives you a little bit of an idea now. So we're going to go right in here. We're going to give it that one portion that's just kind of lighter than red, and then we fade out from there. Going to do that here. Let's get that little section right there. Like I said, final highlights, that sort of stuff. That's we'll talk about more of that in our final details, and I think I'll try and throw a gallery up here for you too, like I've done on the other workbench things, so you can sort of see what that's like. I'll try and do those on other videos too. Like I said, it keeps adding extra time along the entire process, which is just why I kind of was trying to avoid having to do that too. So here we're going to do that same highlight there. Now I could do chipping, rust, all kinds of stuff there. But in the case of these, that was not what was wanted, so no chipping and rust there. Alright, so that pretty well gets us set up. Like I said, we're going to go into all that magenta stuff like you see in here, especially along that back right there. That'll be the next thing that we play around with. And we're going to bring out, I believe that is this right here. Yeah, this crimson magenta. So we'll be right back with that. As promised, the next phase is going to be that magenta stuff that you see in the skin, and we are going to mess around with, well, guess what? Magenta Green Stuff World Intensity Ink, and that is right here. This is what we're looking to do. That stuff along the spine. You can see that we also have a fair amount here in the chest area there. The whole idea is that these are some kind of mutated whatever, And this gives them, it's more than just a little bit of rosiness. And see how intense that ink is right there? That is just really going to influence our regular paint colors here. Now I'm going to have to put some more maiden flesh out. We will do that. I'm just going to leave it over here. Now again, the reason why I'm thinking of adopting more of these little tubs here, you can see how that's starting to spread out really rapidly there, but look at that. Look at how intense that is. I mean, they're intensity inks after all, so I suppose it makes sense. But let's not have everything that quite intense. That's the red liner, and see how that sort of draws it in now towards more of a grayed down purplish color. So we got a few little things we can work with here. Let's just see what we get. And I'm going to make sure you can see that. Now let's start to drop this glaze in. And you can see now how the metal of the spine, that starts to show up by default. By painting something else, we bring out that little bit of differential. And we can go in and clean that up even more later too. But look at the dramatic difference just that makes. Because you have essentially a neutral gray, and you are now painting one of the most saturated, intense colors right next to it. So that's that other form of contrast. I'm always talking about the multiple forms of contrast, not just light versus dark, not just red versus green, but that saturated versus unsaturated. It's a completely sort of undervalued, underrated, what would you say, form of contrast. It's just not something that people think about naturally. They gravitate towards those other forms, heck, even hard and soft edges. People are more prone to sort of remember those and go with those than these other forms. And it's a shame, because you can see the difference that can make straight away. Now let's get a little bit of that. I'm going to get some of that tan color in there. Now we're going to try and spread this out a touch here. It's got a little bit more of the water in it. I suppose it could have used some of the, the master medium, I think is what it's called. But we'll go with this for now. So look at the difference that makes. Are they both? There we go. So real quick, huge difference. Now, as always, too much of a good thing is too much of a good thing, and it can become too much of a good thing in a hurry. I believe that was the painting parable from an episode, maybe a couple episodes ago. And I'm repeating it because, well, it's kind of the truth. And these are, in some cases, they're as much a reminder to me as it is some kind of sage advice for you. It's me just kind of reminding myself, like, hey, don't forget, you go overboard with that, you're going to end up just having to get rid of it, or tone it down, or something like that. So save yourself some extra trouble, maybe by once in a while just kind of pausing. You got the groove on, there's magenta here, there's magenta there, this is fantastic. Sometimes just put the halt order on the stop order and go, all right, do I really, yes, it looks neat here, but is it taken away from other things? I suppose that is maybe what we're getting at with that little ramble. Does it really add as much as you think it does? And yes, less is more. I love that little phrase. I think that's certainly not my phrase. That's been around for a long time. And yes, it gets used an awful lot for a reason, because it's true. Sometimes a little hint of it has more impact, I guess, It's not trying to be nasty or something like that. It's just, well, yeah, sometimes a little bit of a thing is better than just kind of getting bombarded by it. Loses its impact. I guess that's the other thing. Now let's take that red liner, go with a little more of that magenta, and we will then go over here. That the teeth will put those back in again, but I need to get myself that kind of exposed gum line there first. That's more important than just, okay, having to go in and repaint a couple of teeth. Now, in here, this will be a little tricky. I'm just trying to get my magenta down into that area. And remember, I'm still probably going to go in with, oh gosh, probably the maiden flesh, a little bit of the green. But see, that really gives that a whole different look. Things start to look, instead of just, well, this is nice, serene flesh around all these hideously warped muscles. Now it's kind of, well, yeah, something's been going on here. This is not quite normal, but yet it looks like it can still potentially be alive. So let's move on to our next one here. And yeah, see how this is sliding along here? That's the one thing I've definitely noticed about the intense ink. So I'm going to keep saving those water bottle lids, and I will use those just like I did with the contrast paints, because I think for sure what it does is it sort of stains the little chamois that's underneath there. Although these chamois, I gotta say, I know there's lots of talk of mold and stuff that develops in people's wet palettes. Well, I haven't really had that problem. Now, granted, I don't keep the same sponge in there for, well, I haven't really been doing this for months and months, at least with the wet palettes. But I haven't had the mold thing happening. Now, I'm definitely more willing to just toss the chamois, that little piece of chamois there. If it's looking a little gritty, I'll just get rid of it, because that's the beauty of something that's not costing a whole bunch of money. Is that, well, all right, yeah, it served its needs. You know, I used it for a week, or heck, even a couple of days. Now I'm just gonna chuck it. Doesn't matter. It's a few cents worth of chamois, so what's the big deal in chucking it? No big deal at all. So yeah, the homemade wet palette, it was born of necessity. I never wanted a wet palette I didn't seek it out. It just, because of all of the moisture in the house and everything, and even now, that sort of humming sound you hear, that's a bunch of fans. They're just trying to keep the air circulating here. And I apologize if it makes a little bit of noise, but hey, that's what you gotta do. Those same fans are also drying out the paint. This would already be totally dry if I didn't have the wet palette here. That is not, even in the wintertime, it was not that bad. So I had to come up with something, and I think I've seen other folks, some of the patrons, they've come up with their own innovations like that. Sometimes there's a need that arises that you never expected, and you deal with it. Look at that. That is just, it adds so much in such a short period of time. I think I first started to do this kind of magenta add-on like this, ironically enough, on some of the winter bolt action figures. Obviously not, well, there was no spine to paint or anything like that. but on some of the faces to give them that sort of winter frosted flesh look. That's probably not a breakfast cereal you want to eat, but where it's the skin is almost kind of getting burned. Anyway, maybe even the first stage to frostbite, it actually turns red, like really bright red. And I've been doing that on a lot of the winter troops, and then I started doing it on the Song of Ice and Fire stuff, and I really enjoy it. It really adds something. Now here I'm gonna go one step a little more towards the bright end with this. So just getting a little extra oomph in a few places here. Just a bit extra. And like I said, that adds so much more. Yeah, check that out. And see, I think here, yeah, in this camera you can now, it's obviously it's a little glossy because it just is, it's still wet. And that's because we've used the, I almost said contrast paints, because we're using the intensity inks. Alright, again, not gonna go too far with that. Let's go back to our first one here, and I'm gonna do something similar. So again, that some of the maiden flesh into the magenta intensity ink. Drop this down into here. A few of these places like so. And I think I'm going to go here. Now let's see what we got going on back here. Now, yeah, I just looked at my reference picture. Good thing I did. Because there are some lighter portions in here. Like that. Yep. I was like, okay, yeah, what am I missing here? Now, each of these poses is obviously different. See, this is the key. Because I left some of that dark behind. You can still see some of the darker magenta. But now we start to incorporate some of this even more saturated, brighter pink. Really giving that sort of a sour look right there. That's what it needed. So now we just see how hard was that? Not really hard at all. But it really does, it looks like we probably worked away at that, doing all kinds of layering and everything else for hours and hours. Nah, not really necessary. Let's get some of that brighter pink over here. And then we're going to go on to our other figure over here. Yeah, ideally, I would have just been working on one of these at a time. But I thought, since the poses are different, there could be some benefit to you to see, well, how does he do? How do you get that same look on two figures that are clearly have a different sculpt to them, a different pose? If it was the exact same figure, and that's why I do some of those, I try to give you a mix of that, where, okay, we're going to just take this exact same figure. We did that with the Dark Sword figure. Now, I guess not everybody has seen that, because the Dark Sword stuff is at the $10 pledge level, so maybe you haven't seen it, but it was a Song of Ice and Fire, and I had found a picture on the Dark Sword website, and I thought, you know what, here, let's match that other color scheme that someone else did, and all I have are just the reference pictures that I got from the site, and now I have to try and somehow guess what they did, including the freehand pattern and everything else, and just match that as close as possible. because, and I think we talked about it in that episode. Well, all right, you're going through the internet and you see a figure and I really like that color scheme. May not even be the same figure. Like maybe you saw this thing on a dwarf, but you really want to put it on a halfling. I don't know, that same color scheme. I thought something like that could maybe help you then translate that data from one type of figure to another. Alright, that gives us some nice, warm, juicy magentas there. Now I want to add, just before we close out this segment, I want to add a little bit of greens back into this here. So this is, say, made in flesh. We've got that. There's still a little bit of our intensity inks floating around out here. Now this is going to be delicate because it has to be just dark enough and just light enough. That is just about what we were looking for. Maybe a touch lighter. Just a touch lighter. We'll do this again. That's about, okay, that's pretty close to what I was looking for. Yeah. Because I also, I'm adding a lot of that magenta stuff, but I felt like I needed to add a little green. Now I'm going to actually make that a touch lighter even. That's it. I think now, see, I kind of had to walk my way up towards what I wanted. I had to be willing to do that. See how we've got sort of green and magenta there, kind of side by side. Let's get some of that green down in here. And, oh, look at that. It makes a pretty darn fine metal color too. Who would have thought flesh and metal we're using the same color for both? Who'd have thunk it? Let's get a little bit of that into here too. Spread that around. The other thing it's going to do is when you have a larger figure like this, and it's got all these kind of big, broad areas, it adds a little bit of interest. You can have something that's really nicely shaded, and it can be boring as heck. I know because that's sort of what happened on some of the earlier figures. At least when I look at them now, after several years of separation, I look at it and go, yeah, okay, that was shaded really nice from light to dark. If you make it black and white, it would look really nice. But we see things, for the most part, in color, and color-wise, nowhere near as interesting as this. Not as much for the eye to check out, so I'd really try to get that into every figure. Some kind of surprise color, but one that makes sense, because what's really... Now, I don't watch a lot of mystery shows mostly for this reason, because they don't really give you all the information, and they just go, surprise! And just, well, okay, that was a cheap surprise, because there was no foreshadowing whatsoever. You just kind of hid most everything, and it's, oh, look how clever we are. That reaction there, you don't want that from people looking at your miniature. So give them some sort of sense, like, okay, where's this green is coming from? Yeah, all this green armor around him. So we've sort of foreshadowed, we've explained why that green is there, because there's all this other green over here. Green's not there, or if it's not in the skin tone, well, then it's kind of like, okay, so, and obviously what do they call them, red herrings or something like that? Well, too many red herrings get really irritating. Again, you You can see how all this is geared towards not irritating the viewer. Especially when that viewer has also paid you some portion of funds to paint that for him. That's the last person you want to bore. At least I'd think. I'm going to get even a touch more maiden flesh into there. And you can see I make some adjustments on the fly here. Change things. Say, you know what? That seemed like it was a good idea at the time, but now that I've got this or this around it, maybe that's not the best idea in the world, so I will change it. So again here, see getting, working some of that green into there. And I say, oh, you know what? I'm going to work it into some of my metals here. So we're going both ways with this. Now let's, just before I forget, I'm going to hit the teeth real quick here. They show up more on this one than on the other one. Where are we at? Just a couple of shots there. Few more. Let's get some, bring some lights back onto these knuckles here. That kind of, in our efforts to do some different things with the skin colors elsewhere, we lost a little bit of our lights and darks there. Restore some of those, or get some more in here. Again, don't worry about, it's not law that you can't go in and add some more highlights after the fact. It's about being flexible, remember. And as always, and I've told a few people this just in private conversations this week, you have to be, gotta be patient with yourself, because, well, we are far more harsh critics of ourselves than anybody, than any internet warrior, believe it or not. So we always want to progress as fast as possible. And sometimes it takes a little longer to grasp a certain concept. So that's fine there. Now we're going to go and do that on this guy here, and we're going to add some of that lighter, even lighter green here. And like I said, what I'll do is I'll do some of the insignia on just maybe one of the guys, because, well, it's going to be the exact same on both of them. And I don't think you don't need to tack on another 20 minutes of me painting the exact same freehand on both figures. So we'll do it on one of these guys. Not sure which one it's going to be yet. You'll find out when I do. So again, using a flesh tone color there. It's technically a flesh tone to lighten that up. The other thing that green does is, yeah, it adds interest. It kind of connects things. It connects those armor pieces together in a way, almost like it'll connect the dots. Again, breaks up larger areas that could potentially be boring. And then it also helps, let's say there's an area where the sculpting was a little rough, or there was a gap that had to be filled, and now you distract away from that by just saying, oh, look at this neat magenta right next to the green. Look at that. It's the Jedi thing. This is not the mold line you were looking for. Now that could make an interesting meme. That's what I should have. I should put out a challenge for people to make memes. A meme challenge. Meme of the month. So we're gonna call that good enough. What are we gonna do? We're gonna do those kind of caution stripes here, and we've got a number to throw up here, and we're going to put one of our little symbols over here. I don't think they go on both. I think they just go on one. So we're just going to go here. So 1, 2, these 4 spaces here. We're going to get in here and do that quick little freehand stuff, and then we'll just kind of, I don't know if we'll do a final thoughts. It depends on how much time is left for recording. So we'll be right back with that. Let's do that freehand stuff here. Don't need a whole bunch out on the palette. This is actually the maggot white here, and that is, it's actually another game color. I just happened to see it. It's filthy brown. No kidding. I mean, that's what it is. It's not as good as palette sludge. It's a little brighter than palette sludge, I'd say. But what we are going to do is we are going to use this to make ourselves a little caution stripe type thing. Not quite sure why you'd have a caution stripe there, but it's a thing. It's a sci-fi thing. Let's do that. Taking a little bit of that magenta ink. That's going to tone it down, make it a little more towards the orange, and looks like I got 3 stripes to deal with, and that one does go about to here. Second stripe here. And you notice that because I've sort of preserved, here, now you can see it. I was worried there was a little bit of glare on there for you. Widen this out a little bit more, and there. So you see what's happening here too, because we're still actually painting with the intensity inks. It's working like the way the contrast paints did, making it a little bit translucent, which means we don't have to sit here and screw around trying to shade this yellow. Yeah, we could drop a glaze over it or something like that, but blend that a little bit faster, and it's almost looks a little more natural, a little more organic, as opposed to, well, that was too bright and we're going to knock it down. And you can sort of tell. Sometimes you can tell when somebody painted something and they must have had that oops moment, and then they had to tone it down. Well, we're trying to avoid the oops moment. So see, we can always now go in with a little more of that yellow stuff. Just a little more of it. Now it's trickier on this one because it runs over a few of those lines. It's weird, it gives it actually more dimension, but it also makes it a little bit more of a pain to deal with. So here, again, the way the yellow pattern fell, it just happened to work out pretty nicely. I mean, we can even go a step later. We can even take some of this and mix it in there. What it's going to do is also make it a touch more opaque. Bam, right here. And we'll just say enough is enough there. Let's go over here. Now this is technically supposed to be a little more in shadow, so maybe not a whole bunch here except for there. Leave that go. Now let's put a little number on that helmet there. So once again, thinning that down. Have to decide, do I want a 2-digit number here? And can't really go much past here as far as how far down that helmet it goes. So we're getting a little bit of water in there. Looks like I got this pretty well centered here, and I already did a 50, so I'm going to go with a 7 here. And you can see we're doing a little bit of that stencil type work. There's that little gap set right in there. Now all I've got space for is a 1. If I was to do any other number, it's going to be off-centered, and then I'm going to have some repainting to do, and, well, we don't want to have to do that. Another thing that can be handy when you're doing your, well, actually any kind of freehand, or especially something that is like this, where it has to be legible. When you turn it upside down, that can reveal, you can go, oh, geez, that's not terribly level. That's not terribly even, but that is, so we got that settled in there. Now, the last thing we add, this is the same symbol that we were putting on some of that German infantry. I think that was workbench 10, maybe? Yeah, that was probably 10. And I actually have a few of those because well, there were more to do. More of them showed up. So, here, we'll just see, we're dropping in our background there, and here they are. So we are just putting in that symbol right there. Oh, what the heck, while I got this, I'm gonna do that on the other one too. Alright, let's make sure we got on the right arm, which is the left arm. We'll drop that in here. And then I'm gonna have to get some of my clear red out here, and then we'll fill in our little pattern thing, and it'll all be set. Just a bit more. Now, oh, what the heck? Let's see if I can do something a little more complicated numeral-wise here. So let's try something like a 6 here. And you're going to see again, we're going stencil pattern on this. That means a gap. But you can also see we've got it thicker in some places than others. Like so. Now, can I get away with another number? Let's do this. And we have a 0 here, if possible. All right, can you see? Here, I'm gonna move that so you can see it. It's gonna be a little tougher for me, but there we go. And as always, you want to clean it up later. You clean it up a little later. Now, as I see this here, I'm gonna throw some lights on the teeth here. There we go. But now it leaves that magenta behind. A lot easier than trying to paint that magenta in after the fact. A lot easier, just get the teeth right on top of it there. I see I need to get a little highlight there. This is that portion where you start to look around and go, ooh, yeah, okay, I gotta bump this up here. I gotta knock this down over here. Oh, I forgot something over there. Now, gotta get that clear red here. And yes, I have to put it down on there this way because I barely actually just squeeze a tube of anything or a jar of anything anymore. I just kind of take the cap off and pull the nozzle off. I don't care. Again, has nothing to do with what company makes it. These bottles all jam. And it's not my favorite kind of jam. So now let's get in. Doesn't take very much. Like I said, you put this in, then you clean it up later. But while I'm here, I'm also going to do a few other little additions, refinements. We got our other one over here. Okay. So we're sort of doing that negative painting once again. It's weird, it looks kind of like a daisy before you do the rest of the work on that. That's pretty funny. Or a sunflower or something. Okay. Now I just realized I want to get some brown liner here. Couple things we can use this for. First, we can use it to get a bit of an outline around here, because that's been done on all of them. And if I do it now, if it got a little wider in some places, going over with the white is gonna, that'll let me essentially sort of clean that up with a color I was gonna put there anyway. So it's, I know it sounds again like really minutia as far as, are you really saving an extra step there? Well, yeah, sort of, kind of was. And that doesn't seem like much of a time-saving thing, a few seconds here and there, but when you add it up on as many miniatures as, well, maybe you got to paint for your army, or I have to just paint on a daily basis, it adds up. It really does add up. Now here, on these stripes, see, we can do a little, now we're doing a little bit of cleanup work here too. A little bit of cleanup work there. Now, I would love to do chipping and all kinds of fun stuff on these, but chipping was not asked for. It's actually kind of specific instructions not to do that. So we don't. Oh, that's almost centered for you. Again, we're going to do our little patch outline there. And again, I don't have to fret too much because I know what's the last thing I'm doing in there. I'm going back in there with that lighter color. Which we're going to do right now. Here it is. Hopefully, yeah, sorry if I moved the palette on you just a bit. Now, let's clean this puppy up here. Right down the center there. So we've got some cross action there. And now, again, just making sure you can see that. We start to fill this in. We start to sharpen some things up. Just like that. It's weird how the timing of things can help make stuff easier. It's because we put the lighter color down first, then put the red, then did the outline, and then went kind of backfilled in with the lighter color. That just made it so much easier. The design is, there's nothing incredibly different about it's just how we approached it. Now typically, and I know I say this all the time on the army painting series, that's that little thing right there, that this concept here of, well, yeah, now I know just how to paint something really, really quickly and efficiently. Those are generally the kind of things that you now know as the project comes to an end. And you are perfectly adept at painting the thing you no longer have to paint anymore. That can be a frustrating realization, so sometimes I try to avoid making that realization. Now, I think it's a little different here, but because I'm constantly having to either paint stuff again or constantly add to things. But I think for most folks, once they've painted an army, they've kind of seen all they want to see of it, and they have moved on. They've moved elsewhere. Alright, so I'm going to turn this upside down here. And just go back in. See if we can't get that nice and cleaned up. And then I'm going to try and go in here with the time that's left. Just spend a few minutes here looking at a few edges. Like here. Can you see that? Now you can. I'm just trying to, that one little point there. Now this is, like I said, it's not supposed to be like chrome, so I have to be judicious where I'm adding this final light here. If it gets too light, I'm just going to have to tone it down and waste more time. We don't want to be doing that. And we just work our way around, see what we find. And maybe throw some glazes in a place here where you say, that's just too much. Now, you have the option to do what you want. You want to put chipping in some part, well, you just go ahead and do it. Because it's your figure, your army, whatever. You're in charge. You do whatever you think is going to work best for the effect you want. Just adding a little touch of this lighter color in here. I would have actually, could have been interesting to do some kind of heat effect on there. But then if it had been done other parts of the army, then maybe that would have been okay, but it hasn't, so we won't do that. But what we do have now is a couple of these guys mostly ready to go. There they are. Bruce and Fred. Yar. So we did several different things. We even popped in a little bit of freehand there. We got to experiment with the intensity inks. Again, from Green Stuff World. So these are very fun. So there you go, greenstuffworld.com. And this time we mixed them with the Reaper paints. And I'm going to do the same thing then with contrast paints on a few other figures. And then that's going to be, well, the contrast paints kind of recede into the background for a bit because I'm going to play with these intensity inks more. But see all the fun greens and magentas we got there? There we go. So if you can, maybe drop a like on this video or whatever. YouTube likes it. Whatever makes them happy helps all of us. And I'm going to keep doing these experiments here with these on the workbench sessions. So thanks a lot. Appreciate all the Patreon support. Means a lot. Means I can do stuff like this and get more cameras. So thanks again, guys, and I will catch you on the next workbench session.